I'm the owner of Reuter Associates Architects, and I live just around the corner from this fine little church. And I've had a firm here. We've lived in Ann Arbor for about 30 years in the same house that we bought for $24,000. And I have my own architectural firm for the last 20 years, and we do a lot of residential work. And we've probably done over 40 additions, I would imagine, and consulting in the Old West Side over the years alone. Our practice also now includes a lot of commercial work. And the reason we're sort of standing here in front of this fine little German Methodist church is I think it's kind of the center of a neighborhood that is very interesting to me. And this neighborhood is not one of necessarily fancy homes or really wonderful examples of particular architecture, but it's rather kind of a wonderful collection of industrial and small vernacular houses. The neighborhood was really founded by German immigrants who came over in the 1830s, early 1830s, and in a few years almost 5,000 German immigrants came and populated much of the Old West Side. And so the architecture you see here is a result of many of the business people and craftsmen from that early German infusion. We're going to leave out many of the houses that I really like. We're not going to see Greek Revival architecture, which are many fine examples. And there's some nice examples of Queen Anne. Instead, I'm going to concentrate on simple houses here. And this church is a very interesting example of an early sort of Gothic Revival church. It's very simple and it's very restrained. And one thing you might notice about this church is the wonderful lighting that occurs on the inside. The lighting is accomplished by windows on the south and on the west. And so if you're going into this beautiful little sanctuary, it has all natural woodwork and it has tremendous amounts of light coming through these beautiful stained glass windows. It's very simple and restrained on the exterior, and the tower is particularly noteworthy. And you can see it's been beautifully maintained through the years by the Community in Christ Church, who's been here, I think, since the 1950s, I may recollect. The bell is the original bell, and it's still in working order, and we hear it from time to time. Just next to the church, and I hate to miss it, is a beautiful little Queen Anne-style house. There are many houses like this in the neighborhood. I'm not going to emphasize them today, but I just couldn't pass up the chance to have you look at this. We're at the corner of what is the working area of the Old West Side. Many of the original residents were employed here. And if we look at the left, we can see the Michigan Furniture Company. It was founded by Keck in 1861, I think it is. And then as we pan a little bit to the building, the four-story building with the tower behind us there was a brewery, and that was built in 1861 by Peter Brehm. And many of the older Germans, when I first came here, had stories of carrying buckets of beer to construction sites for workers. On the right is the old Argus Camera Works. This whole complex at one time was the Argus Camera Company. And there's an interesting story behind all of these buildings when they were converted to Argus Camera Works. The first building you see here on the left was the original building that was built by John Keck in 1866. It may not look like it, but it's actually a wood frame building with brick veneer. One of the unusual features of this building is the proportions of the windows. They're very narrow and very tall. And as we pan then to the right, a later addition by John Keck, which was in 1879, expanded the furniture company into quite a large building. And you can see here that this is a fine example of a mill type of architecture with a lot of light, a lot of windows, and not a lot of brick here. The interior was quite light and afforded the workers quite a nice amount of light for working on furniture. We're here on Mulholland Street. And I picked Mulholland Street because it's a unique developer-created neighborhood at the turn of the century. The character of this neighborhood derives from a couple of things. One, the lots are only 40 feet wide and 80 feet deep, and the public right-of-way is only 40 feet wide, and the street is about 22 feet wide. So it's an early example of a kind of a new urbanism here, right here in the Old West Side. One of the things that these houses were sort of noted for was their concrete block foundations. Since the stone started to play out and developers built these, the handwork of doing stone basements became too expensive, and early concrete block factories were started just a few blocks over here in Lutz Court about 1910. So some of these foundations date from that era and are of 8-inch concrete block. These houses, some people classify them as classic revival, but I prefer the McAllister's classification of gable front national folk houses. And these houses were promoted by early developers after the advent of balloon frame construction, which made pre-cutting and hauling of materials, which greatly simplified the construction. If you look at these houses, they're almost virtually identical, but the character of the porches, the landscaping, and the different paint colors are what are really extraordinary about this street and Murray Street, which is a sister street to it just east of here. One of the things about the people who live here, I think that they have a more adventurous sense of color than a lot of people do in a lot of subdivisions. Just at the bottom of Mulholland Street here is the Ann Arbor Pumping Station number 2. This site was very low early on and was a source of a lot of spring water for residents in the area. Later on, the city built a pumping station here to distribute water. The pumping station belonged to the city and was vacant for many years, and it was sold, and Fry Peters Architects developed this as a condominium project, I think about the mid-'80s. Just around the corner from Mulholland Street is this fine house built by a well-to-do German who founded the Allmendinger Organ Company, which was in a building located just a few blocks east of here. It's a fine example and a very restrained German example of the stick-style house, which was a transition from Gothic revival to Queen Anne from the 1860s to the 1890s. The walls are covered by a simple wood frame that outlines the nicely paired windows. The gable end roof trusses are a common characteristic of this style. The porch is extremely handsome with its tapered columns and chamfered corners. Note the bandsawed rafter tails, and it has an unusual airlock entry that projects from the main house.